Welcome to the Past in Pictures channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. A satellite image shows the area of New York surrounded by water, with trails of smoke visible on a day that entered history. The photo was taken from the International Space Station and records the city from a rare point of view. Lewis Hines' photo shows breaker boys picking pieces of slate from the conveyor belts where freshly broken coal passed by in a harsh work environment. His images were essential in building support for laws that fought child labor in the United States. A Chinese woman, identified as a survivor of an exploitation system during the Japanese occupation, is seen being interviewed by a Royal Air Force officer in Rangoon on August 8, 1945. The image was recorded shortly after the end of the conflict in the region, and now forms part of the historical archive on that period. The Titanic appears sailing calmly on its maiden voyage in the final photo taken before the accident. The image shows the ship at sea only a few days before the tragedy that made it known around the world. A Tasmanian tiger is photographed in captivity shortly before the species disappeared in 1936. The image records one of the last known animals, a symbol of Tasmanian wildlife and a subject of current scientific projects. Small improvised shacks cover a patch of rock and dirt in Central Park during the Great Depression. These settlements became known as Hoovervilles and symbolized the crisis that affected thousands of people in the 1930s. A cobblestone street in San Francisco shows a large crack in the ground after the 1906 earthquake. The photo directly reveals the line of the San Andreas fault cutting through the landscape. A photo from 1969 shows Niagara Falls with its flow drastically reduced to allow engineering work at the base. The exposed riverbed revealed piled rocks and objects that had previously been hidden under the water. Before and after images of a soldier show the work of sculptor Anna Coleman Ladd, who created realistic masks for men with facial injuries after the First World War. The pieces helped these veterans return to social life. Elizabeth Eckford walks alone toward Little Rock Central High School in 1957 while facing a hostile crowd opposed to school integration. The image became a landmark of the national effort to end segregation in United States schools. Men seated in a courtroom cover their faces with hats during the trial of Al Capone in 1931. Many did not want to be identified in photos from that historic session. A large safety net was installed under the Golden Gate Bridge during its construction in the 1930s to protect the workers. It saved 19 men, who became known as the Halfway to Hell Club. More than 300,000 people walk across the Golden Gate Bridge during the celebration of its 50th anniversary. The photos show the bridge completely filled with pedestrians, creating a rare image of the structure without cars. Soldiers pose beside huge acoustic listening devices used to detect airplanes before the invention of radar. The structures worked by amplifying the sound of engines in the sky and represent an experimental phase of military technology. The Brewster armor appears as a rigid metal suit with a square helmet and heavy front protection. The equipment was one of the first attempts at full-body armor for combat in the First World War. Walt Disney presents the design of a gas mask inspired by Mickey Mouse, created during the Second World War to make the equipment less frightening for children. The piece combines protective function with a cartoon character. A close-up shows the Mickey Mouse gas mask with the character's familiar features, adapted to the shape of the equipment. The image records a curious attempt to soften the appearance of a safety device. The justices of the Supreme Court of the United States sit in an official session in one of only two known photos taken inside the chamber. The image was made discreetly in 1937 when cameras were not allowed. During the Battle of Britain, cows were painted with bright white stripes so that drivers could see them during nighttime blackouts. The photo shows a woman applying paint to one of the animals in the field. Louisa Ann Swain appears in a portrait wearing typical 19th century clothing and is remembered as the first American woman to vote in a general election in 1870. Her act took place decades before women's suffrage was adopted across the entire country. Rows of barrels appear in a French military camp during the First World War in the Gallipoli campaign. Wine was one of the supplies sent to the troops along with other provisions. After companies realized that women without resources used flour sacks to make clothing for their children, some mills began producing the bags with printed fabrics in 1939. The change allowed the material to have a second use that was more dignified and practical. Children climbing on a huge meteorite on display illustrate the size of the Willamette, the largest meteorite ever found in the United States. Weighing about 34,000 pounds, it is among the largest in the world. An image from 1931 shows Midtown Manhattan seen from the Empire State Building shortly after its opening, with a limited number of tall buildings. In a modern comparison, the same view appears filled with new towers, marking the vertical expansion of the city. This image of the French countryside is considered the first photograph ever made, created by Joseph Nicephore Niepce in the early 19th century. He applied a light-sensitive coating to a pewter plate and exposed it for many hours from an upstairs window. Robert Cornelius appears in a blurred portrait. From 1839, considered one of the first photographic self-portraits. To obtain the image, he had to remain completely still for several minutes in front of the camera. A street scene in Paris recorded by Louis Daguerre in 1838 shows mostly empty buildings and sidewalks, but one person stands still while having his shoes shined. The long exposure meant that only those who remained still appeared in the image. A grainy photo shows part of the globe as seen from the lunar surface in 1966, captured by the Lunar Orbiter 1 spacecraft. It is one of the first records in which Earth appears as a planet viewed from afar. A blurred radiograph of a human hand made in 1895 is considered one of the first X-ray images of a body. The photo marks the beginning of a new era in medical examinations. The city of Boston appears in an aerial view in 1860 in a photo taken by James Wallace Black from a balloon. The image was given the title, "Boston as the Eagle and the Wild Goose See It." John Quincy Adams, former President of the United States, appears seated with his legs crossed in a photo from 1840, years after the end of his term. He is remembered as the first American president ever to be photographed. The White House appears in an image from 1846, considered one of the first photographs of the presidential residence. The record shows the facade long before the renovations of the 20th century. The Statue of Liberty appears still under construction in France, revealing its structure before it was sent to the United States. The scene shows the monument in its assembly phase, with metal details exposed. The face of the Statue of Liberty appears by itself, displayed on French soil before being installed on the final monument. The photo highlights the scale of the sculpture by focusing only on the upper portion. A small table holds sandals, bowls, a cup, and a few simple objects that represented most of Gandhi's material possessions. The image highlights the minimalist way of life that accompanied his political and spiritual work. Gutzon Borglum's model for Mount Rushmore appears in a more complete version, with the presidents carved down to their waists. The scale model shows the original plan for the work before the changes that led to the monument as it stands today. Willard Scott appears in 1963, dressed as the first version of Ronald McDonald, with clothing and props very different from the mascot known today. The photo records the beginning of the advertising image of the character. Selma Burke stands beside the large panel that served as the basis for the portrait of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Her artistic work inspired the image that still appears on the 10-cent coin in the United States today. A diver is photographed underwater in 1899 in one of the first underwater photos taken by someone completely submerged. The image marks an important technical advance in photography in aquatic environments. Cyclists ride along dirt roads in France in 1903 in the first edition of the Tour de France. Their formal clothing and simple bicycles show how much the world's leading cycling race has changed since then. Players compete in a tennis match at Wimbledon in 1883, still wearing long trousers on a modest court. On that occasion, the English Renshaw brothers defeated the representatives of the United States in one of the first international matchups. Albert Wilson appears playing a drum in old age, identified as the last surviving veteran of the American Civil War. He served in the Union Army and lived until 1956, reaching 106 years of age. The United States ship Langley appears moored with its flat deck as the first aircraft carrier of the United States Navy. Built from a converted ship, it played an important role in early naval air operations. A man uses a rowing machine in a room equipped with maps and machines in the Titanic's gymnasium. The image shows how the ship offered luxury services and physical activities for its passengers at the time. An airplane flies over the old urban area of Baghdad in 1930, revealing compact streets surrounded by an arid landscape. The photo records the city before the major transformations of the 20th century. Stefan Bobrowski, known as Lionel the Lion-Faced Man, appears in a suit and tie with his face covered in long hair because of a condition called hypertrichosis. He performed in international circuses and spoke several languages. An Atlas lion is photographed in its natural habitat around 1925 in North Africa. The species disappeared from the wild a few decades later, making this image a rare record. A portrait shows Daniel Lambert, an 18th century Briton known for reaching more than 317 kilograms in weight, more than 700 pounds. Popular stories attribute to him feats of strength and endurance that fed his fame. A young man in a suit and tie appears in a simple portrait identified as Vincent van Gogh at 20 years of age. Few photographic images of the artist are known, which makes this record especially valuable. A self-portrait from 1896 shows Pablo Picasso still in an academic style with realistic features and a serious expression. The image reveals the artist's early phase before his later aesthetic breaks. Decades later, a self-portrait from 1972 presents Picasso in simple lines and a style close to cubism, with his face reduced to basic shapes. The work contrasts with his youthful output and reflects the synthesis of his artistic journey. A man poses beside a replica of the Welcome Stranger nugget, considered the largest gold nugget ever discovered, found in Australia in 1869. The original weighed almost 72 kilograms, close to 160 pounds, and was sold quickly for a high price. Norma Smallwood smiles in an official portrait after winning the Miss America pageant in 1926. Her image helped define the visual standard of beauty contests of the time. A 17th century painting by Giovanni Stanchi shows a sliced watermelon with an interior very different from the modern fruit, with cavities and much less red flesh. The work illustrates what the fruit looked like before centuries of selective breeding. An old portrait shows President Andrew Jackson in old age in one of the few existing photos of him, taken around 1845. The image connects the historical figure to the earliest days of photography. A Swedish street appears in a scene of organized chaos on September 3, 1967, the day the country began driving on the right side of the road. The photo shows cars, pedestrians, and signs all trying to adapt to the new rule. A group of people seated in chairs around a table drink tea on top of the Great Pyramid of Giza in an old photograph. The photo shows a time when open access to the monument was still allowed. The interior of the White House appears completely opened up with excavations, scaffolding, and machinery during the major renovation at the end of the 1940s. The photo reveals the building almost empty inside while the structure was being reinforced. A large crowd gathers in front of the Capitol building in 1861 during the first inauguration of Abraham Lincoln. Among the columns and windows, the new president appears small, surrounded by the tense atmosphere of the pre-war period. In 1865, another crowd fills the Capitol grounds to witness Lincoln's second inauguration. The photo records a decisive moment on the eve of the end of the Civil War. An identification card issued in 1943 introduces Herman the Cat as a rat-hunting specialist for the United States Coast Guard. The document includes a photo, measurements, and even the cat's paw print. The home insurance building in Chicago appears in a photo with its 10 stories and pioneering metal frame. Built in 1885 and demolished in 1931, it is considered the first modern skyscraper. Ahmed Ali Chellickton stands in uniform beside an early airplane and is considered one of the first black pilots in history. He flew for the Ottoman Empire during the First World War, alongside other pioneers such as Eugene Bullard. The building of the former Fiat factory in Turin has a test track on its roof, where cars were driven after leaving the assembly line. The structure still exists and is a landmark of industrial architecture. The interior of a commercial airplane from the 1960s shows wide seats, 2 aisles, and generous legroom. The scene contrasts with the more compact cabin layout seen on many flights today. Charlotte and her daughter Marjorie appear in a 1912 photo as survivors of the Titanic. They lost the head of the family on the voyage and much of their savings, which made rebuilding their lives a major challenge. Edward Llewellyn proudly poses beside a huge sea bass caught in 1903 off the coast of Santa Catalina Island. The fish weighed about 425 pounds and set a world record. A student poses in his dormitory room around 1910, surrounded by posters, personal objects, and simple furniture. The scene shows how people already took care to personalize their space, even in older-style housing. A golf course worker wears a metal cage-like suit to collect practice balls in safety. The outfit was designed as protection against impacts in areas of heavy practice. Times Square appears with streetcars, early automobiles, and period signs in 1921. The area was already a busy center of advertising and urban traffic. An experimental firefighter suit is shown with a water reservoir wrapped around the wearer's body, an idea meant to protect the user from intense heat. The concept never became widespread, but remains recorded as a technological curiosity. Emma Lillian Todd stands beside one of her airplane designs and is remembered as the first woman to design an aircraft. Her work marks an important example of women's contributions to the history of engineering. Men in top hats and public officials pose in an open car during the inauguration of New York's first subway line in 1904. The scene represents the beginning of a system that would become one of the busiest in the world. William Hutchings is portrayed at 100 years of age in 1864, described as one of the last survivors of the American Revolution. The portrait links the 19th century to events from the founding of the United States. A check for $7,200,000 dated August 1, 1868 records the payment made by the United States to Russia for the purchase of Alaska. The document became a highly important historical piece. A group of athletes formed several levels of a human torch during the Moscow Olympic Games in 1980. The presentation combined choreography and sport symbolism in the stadium. Jack, a South African baboon, is photographed beside a railway worker while operating a lever at a train station in the 19th century. He worked for nearly 10 years as a signalman's helper, received symbolic payment, and became a famous figure along the line. A family poses on the banks of the Niagara River in the 1890s, enjoying a moment of leisure near the rapids. Their formal clothing contrasts with the natural setting, showing how outdoor outings were already part of everyday life. United States Marines appear raising the flag on Iwo Jima during the Second World War in a scene recorded by Joe Rosenthal. The image became one of the most famous news photographs in history. A photo by Berenice Abbott shows a woman doing internal wiring on an International Business Machines computer in 1948 in the early era of computing. The scene reveals the technical and detailed work needed to operate the giant machines of the time. 3 lacemakers work with deep concentration in Brittany, France in 1920, using traditional regional pillows and bobbins. The scene shows a craft practice passed down through generations and strongly present in local culture. A soba delivery worker moves through the streets of Tokyo in 1935, carrying a tall stack of bowls balanced on his shoulder in a photo from the Mainichi Shimbun newspaper. The image shows a traditional delivery method that was very common at the time. An Estonian cyclist poses in 1912 with a bicycle he built himself, showing ingenuity in the early 20th century. The handmade model reveals simple solutions to the lack of industrial equipment in the country. A woman from the high society of the Ottoman Empire appears in an early 1900s portrait, wearing elegant clothing and accessories typical of the urban elite. Her posture and the setting reflect the standards of status and style of that period. A mail carrier from the 1910s appears in full uniform while making deliveries in an urban area. The record shows the growing presence of women in postal services during the early 20th century. A group of guests celebrates a wedding in Harlem, New York in 1983 in a vibrant scene of local community life. The clothing, poses, and expressions reflect the culture and style of the neighborhood in the early 1980s. A view of the Cumberland Street tenements in Dublin is recorded in a 1940s photo by Paul Popper. The simple housing, narrow streets, and modest conditions show the urban reality of Ireland in the post-war years. Behind the scenes of the first Godzilla film appear in 1954, showing actors in special suits and miniature sets used to create scenes of destruction. The images reveal practical techniques that mark the beginning of the famous Japanese franchise. A scene recorded in Colombia in 1916 by photographer Leonard Frank shows aspects of daily life in the local community in the early 20th century. The image preserves details of clothing, architecture, and social atmosphere from that time. Employees at a Kmart store in North Carolina watched the Apollo 11 landing on July 16, 1969, gathered in front of televisions set up in the store. The scene shows how the event brought people together across the country. A one-room schoolhouse appears in 1923, showing students gathered in a simple space that held all grade levels together. The setting reveals wooden desks, a blackboard, and teaching methods typical of the period. Buzz Aldrin captures the first self-portrait taken in space in 1966 during the Gemini 12 mission. The image shows the astronaut reflected in his visor as he floats outside the spacecraft. The photo presents the mission and a historic milestone in space exploration. Queen Victoria appears smiling in an open carriage on the Isle of Wight in the 1890s in one of the rare relaxed records of her reign. The scene shows the monarch in a lighter public moment, surrounded by the British atmosphere of the time. An old farmhouse appears in Manhattan in 1879, exactly where 84th Street and Broadway intersect today. The scene shows a rural past that came before the urban expansion of the island. The United States ship Langley appears in 1928 as the first aircraft carrier of the United States, created from the conversion of an old coal cargo ship. The vessel marked the beginning of American naval aviation. A high school auto shop class in the 1950s shows students learning mechanics in the golden age of American cars. The image records a real moment in technical education at the time, highlighting how young people were trained to work directly with engines and tools inside the school. The comet opens the era of commercial jet aviation, shortening travel times for scientists, doctors, and researchers. This speed allowed conferences and scientific collaborations to expand on a global scale. The introduction of the pressurized cabin made it possible to fly higher and with greater comfort, influencing studies of human physiology. High-altitude tests contributed to research on breathing, oxygenation, and vital support systems. The Wright brothers aircraft is presented to the public, showing that controlled flight had become a reality. Decades later, aviation would open paths for air transport of medical supplies and for international scientific work. The Ford Model T appears in its early testing phase, when mass production was beginning to transform transportation and logistics. The mechanical standardization it introduced inspired industrial processes later used in factories that produced scientific and medical equipment. The meeting of the rails at Promontory symbolizes the connection between opposite coasts, transforming land transportation. The railroad linked cities, hospitals, and newly created research centers. Airships expanded human reach in the skies before the airplane took over. These journeys were used for altitude tests and studies of atmospheric conditions that proved useful for aviation and aerospace medicine. Caravels equipped with triangular sails and greater directional control made it possible to cross the Atlantic Ocean. This technology opened routes that expanded maps and allowed scientific exchange between continents. The monumental project connected oceans and shortened global distances. Beyond territorial progress, it required pioneering health studies on malaria and the tropical environment. The team sets up scientific bases in Antarctica, marking one of the largest expansions into extreme regions. It was a milestone for studies of climate, geology, and human adaptation to intense cold. The city begins to reach unprecedented heights with steel construction and modern elevators. Vertical urban growth pushed forward health planning, sanitation, and hospital engineering in major centers. Researchers record the first major excavations of modern Babylon. That moment revealed to the world walls, gates, and traces of one of the earliest complex cities of human civilization. Leonard Woolley's team uncovers houses, temples, and objects that show how urban societies worked 4,000 years ago. The discovery transformed the study of ancient civilizations. The Minoan Palace begins to be revealed with its rooms, columns, and frescoes. These excavations made it possible to understand one of the earliest advanced cultures of the Mediterranean. The photo captures the coexistence of ancient structures and the modernization of Egypt. It shows how ancient civilizations remain integrated into present-day cities. Researchers catalog Mayan temples and sculptures still covered by vegetation. The record marked the beginning of systematic documentation of the civilizations of the Americas. The first expeditions document the Moai statues of Rapa Nui, revealing carving and transport techniques used by an isolated society in the Pacific. The record raised questions about local organization and engineering. Einstein visits Chaplin during the premiere of the film City Lights in Hollywood. The photo brings together two of the most influential minds in their fields, science and cinema. It is one of the most iconic and rare meetings of public figures of the 20th century. The suit, powered by hand-operated air pumps, made it possible to explore depths that had never been reached at the time. This technology opened the way for underwater engineering, rescue work, and nautical archaeology. The photo documents a pioneering experiment. George Hackenschmidt poses showing his strength in the early 20th century and is remembered as the man credited with inventing the bench press exercise. The photo records one of the pioneering names of modern physical culture. A bartender raises his arms and smiles as a crowded bar celebrates in Chicago on December 5, 1933. The scene marks the day Prohibition was repealed and the sale of alcoholic drinks became legal again. A drawing shows the small wooden cabin associated with the birth of Abraham Lincoln in 1809. The simple structure became a symbol of the future president's humble origins.